Hello, so this is understanding and setting boundaries. All boundaries, including the types that I've listed in other videos and talked about in other videos, can be set in one of three ways: permeable, semi-permeable, and rigid. Permeable boundaries, for example, is you draw a line in the sand. You can see there's a boundary there, but there's nothing really stopping you from crossing it. Sometimes a wave comes in and easily washes the boundary away. In terms of emotional and less physical boundaries, we can think of things that overtake us and keep us from thinking and responding. We allow everyone to come into our lives without taking into consideration if they are safe. We trust too easily. For most of us, having overly permeable boundaries will allow unwanted emotional and mental assault from others we need protection from. Also, permeable boundaries may mean we let too much of ourselves out, limiting our level of privacy and sense of self. Rigid boundaries. An example of a rigid boundary is a brick wall. It cannot be moved without a great deal of force. A person with rigid boundaries is closed off so nobody can cross their boundary. Often people with overly rigid boundaries do not allow others to get close to them, emotionally or physically. Rigid boundaries do not allow us to open to new thoughts or ideas and can often keep us in the dark. Semi-permeable / flexible boundaries. Flexible boundaries are firm and clear. They are open enough to allow new ideas, thoughts, and resources to enter when needed, but also sufficiently closed to protect us from harm. Ideally, the closeness is neither overbearing nor intrusive, but comfortable and protective. So, 3 ways of boundaries. Activity. For 3 of the boundary types I have explored in previous videos, it says in the previous sections or other importance to you, identify whether you're enforcing those boundaries of permeable, rigid, or semi-permeable. Then examine how healthy and appropriate how you set your boundary is for you. So I chose physical, relational, and emotional. Thinking now, reading after those definitions, I've changed my answer. So my physical boundaries are very, very flexible, so I'd say semi-permeable. I probably need to be a little bit more, well, actually, no, they're more permeable. There's like that, it's the line in the sand, and then, I need to be more semi-permeable and allow for a little bit of flexibility. Relational, I don't know, I'd say with the relationships, I do have semi-permeable when it comes to making new relationships rigid. And emotional would also be semi-permeable for me. So, the 10 laws of boundaries. Law number 1, the law of cause and effect. If you smoke, you are likely to develop a smoker's cough or even cancer. If you overspend, you are likely to get calls from creditors or worse. If you exercise regularly, you may have fewer colds and more energy. Establishing boundaries helps an individual learn the law of cause and effect and how to protect themselves in the future. Law number 2, the law of responsibility. Setting boundaries and being responsible for one's own life is very important. It is not selfish to want to set boundaries and be the best you. However, it is important to continue to love others while also taking care of ourselves. Law number 3, the law of power. You have the power to admit when you need to make a change, without necessarily having the ability to change it. You have the power to ask for help. You have the power to make the choices that are most positive for you in your life. You have the power to set and enforce new and improved boundaries. Law number 4, the law of respect. When setting and enforcing boundaries, we fear others will not respect our boundaries. They will get angry if we set limits. They won't accept you if you say no. We may even judge other boundaries, thinking we know what is best. If we love and respect others who tell us no, they will then love and respect our no. Our concern should not be what others would do and what we want them to do. They are free to make their own choices. So law number 5, the law of motion. If what you are doing is taking away more than you are getting back, you are doomed to fail. Some people are motivated to do things for less healthy reasons, like fear of loss, fear of it, others' anger, fear of loneliness, guilt, payback, approval, over-identification with another's loss. Law number 6, the law of evaluation. It is important to evaluate the effects of setting boundaries and be responsible to the other person. But that does not mean you should avoid setting a boundary that might hurt or anger someone else. To have boundaries is to have a purposeful life. Sometimes our actions may hurt another, as long as we are not harming them on purpose. For example, it may hurt while you are receiving treatment from the dentist, but in the long run, the dentist helps, not harms. Law number 7, the law of proactivity. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. When working towards boundary changes, it is not uncommon for some people to become very reactive. Pent-up rage explodes into strong attempts to reclaim power that was lost in the past. Law number 8, the law of envy. Envy defines good as what I do not have, and hates the other that has it. We all have envious parts of our personalities, but it becomes destructive when it keeps us perpetually unstable and dissatisfied. Now, number 9, the law of activity. An important part of boundary setting is being active and doing the work. Law number 10, the law of exposure. A personal boundary, is a property line. It defines where you begin and end. Your boundaries define your relation to others. In order for others to honor your boundaries, they need to be made visible and communicated with others. Okay, so begin to set personal boundaries. Step 1, self-awareness. The first step to set boundaries is self-awareness. Pay attention to the situations when you're low on energy, feel butterflies in your stomach, or want to cry. Identifying where you need more space, self-respect, energy, and personal power is the first step. So number 1, it gives you a list of 10. I don't have 10, but it says number 1, people may not, and then blank. So I put humiliate me, touch me without asking, go through my stuff, try to make me change my mind out of guilt me into doing things I don't want to do. And then 2, I have the right to ask for blank. So I have the right to ask for more information, clarification, privacy, space, support, help. To protect my time and energy, it is okay to say no, change my mind, turn my phone off, and take time to myself. Step 2, setting your boundary. Start setting simple but firm boundaries with a graceful and neutral tone. This will feel uncomfortable at first, but as you take care of yourself, the personal power you gain will make it easier. Be sure to have support in place before and after each conversation. If you cannot find support from a friend or family member, you may be able to find a friend online or call a local distress center. Vent any strong emotions with your partner or other supports before having your boundary conversation. Use simple and direct language. So, to set boundary with an angry person, for example, use simple direct language. Say, you may not yell at me. If you continue, I'll have to leave the room. Another example is, I've decided to take all personal calls in the evening in order to get my work done. I will need you to call later. When setting boundaries, there is no need to defend, debate, or over-explain your feelings. Be firm, gracious, and direct. When faced with resistance, repeat your statement or request. 5. Back up your boundary with action. Stay strong. If you give in, you invite people to ignore your needs. So, I'll go back to that personal phone calls at work one. It says, I've decided to take all personal calls in the evening in order to get my work done. I will need to call you later. If the person insists, you repeat it and say, I will need to call you later. If you continue the conversation or accept calls afterwards, people are going to continue doing it, and then the boundary is going to continually get crossed. Step 3, strengthen your internal boundaries. One of the reasons that people take things personally is because they have weak internal boundaries. An internal boundary is like an invisible shield that prevents you from taking in a comment without checking it out first. For example, when someone accuses you of being arrogant, stop and consider the statement before taking it in. When you use this internal shield, especially with difficult people like an ex-spouse or a critical parent, it gives you time to ask yourself the following 3 questions. How much of this is true about me? How much of this is about the other person? What do I need to do, if anything, to regain my personal power or stand up for myself? The last question is very important. Too often, people neglect to stand up for themselves by avoiding confrontation and end up weakening their internal shield, making it harder to set boundaries at all. So, my ex said a lot of things when we broke up, and I did take it personally. But looking at these 3 questions actually probably could have helped me because at that point it wasn't about me, it was about him. And there is not really anything I really needed to do to regain my personal power except for acknowledging that it was about him and stepping away. So practicing boundary setting. For each situation below, it says practice what you would say to assertively set a new boundary, or to enforce an existing one. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but it's just practicing your boundaries. So, for 1, you have a friend who shows up at your apartment without being invited. She always assumes that you have time and want to spend an evening with her watching TV. Tonight, you don't want her around. And also, you don't want to apologize either. So, in that situation, I'd say, look, I'd really appreciate it if you could call before you come over. Because I do not have time for this. I do not have time to sit with you today. There may be other instances, but I have plans. Another example on this list says, your friend calls you late at night when you're already in bed. You want them to stop calling so late. Once again, I would just say, I'm in bed right now. I would prefer it. I go to bed at, we'll say 11 o'clock. I go to bed at 11. I really would need time before then, so I will not be accepting calls past 8 o'clock. If you call, I will ignore your call. So, like, my professors have that. They don't like it. One of their boundaries is do not call them or text them after 8. So, anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.